Hello, my name is Jamie and welcome to this tutorial. Today we'll be modelling a velociraptor. Now, as you may know, I have done this tutorial in the past, a while ago now, and a lot of things have changed with Blender. For example, the user interface, certain hotkeys and things like that. So I thought it was worth doing an updated version of that tutorial, as well as going a bit more in depth in later videos into techniques for generating normal maps. So do a bit of sculpting to get a nice sort of skin texture normal map. We'll do some very basic texture painting and get a basic rig up and running so we can animate the velociraptor. It's a pretty straightforward process. We'll take it pretty slow as I'm going through the videos. So this is aimed more at beginners, sort of approaching to sort of intermediate users of Blender. I've got screencast keys on, so you'll see all of my keystrokes that I make. If I press any buttons, then you can see that and the effect that it has on the scene. And we will go through things fairly slowly, and I'll make sure to call out any hotkeys that I'm using as well. We'll be using the same reference as previously. So to start off in the scene, we need to add in the reference. So we'll go to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad, and then we can just zoom in a bit, and then we'll hold shift and press A, and then we've got a menu here where we can add an image, and we're going to be using it as a reference image, so we'll pick reference, and then go to where you have the image saved. There obviously will be a link in the description where you can download the image, and you can go from there. So in the object data properties here, we then select opacity and just check that box, and then we'll slide that down probably to about half. Don't have to be too accurate, just make it so that you can see the grid lines through the reference, so that makes it easier for you to line up everything together. Now I'll hold down Z and I'll move my mouse to the left, and I can just let go of Z and it will set the viewport shading to wireframe, which means the cube that was there is now transparent, and we can just see the edges of that there. So I'll zoom in a little bit with the mouse wheel. Shift and middle mouse is to pan, so you can move the scene around so you can center on what you want to center on. And so I'll left click on the reference image, and then press G and Z to move that up. And I'm just eyeballing. There is a ground line along here. It's not perfectly flat, but it's a fairly good sort of general point from which we can work from. So G and Z, and just by moving my mouse. When I get close, I can hold down Shift, and basically it lowers the sensitivity on your mouse temporarily whilst you're holding down Shift doing a transform. That allows you to fine-tune the transformation that you're trying to make. So now we can zoom in. We can see this green line that's going across the screen. Might not be super visible on the video, but there is a green line here that's representing the world. If I bring down this transparency a bit, you can see, hopefully see that a bit better. You can see that this foot is pretty much sitting right on that. It doesn't have to be a perfect alignment, but try and get it fairly close, so then you can have the zero of the world being the ground plane, which makes other parts of the process much easier to work with. So we can now select the cube, and before we go any further, we'll just take a look on the outliner over here. And in the main collection, we've got the camera, empty, the light, and the cube. And for now, we're not going to need to worry too much about what's going on here, but this is a good spot with which to rename your objects, especially early on in the process. So I'm just double clicking on the name empty, and I will call that my reference image. And then the cube is what we will be turning into the velociraptor. So I'm just going to call that raptor. There we go. Okay, so now grabbing the cube, I'm going to actually go into front view. So by pressing 1 on my numpad, and then tab into edit mode. So hit tab, and then I'm now in edit mode. I'm on vertices select mode. So then I'm going to hit Control R, and when there's a yellow line going vertical here, so usually I move my mouse to sort of be close to the edge that I want to bisect, and I'm going to left click when that's like that. And then we get the option to move around. I don't want to have this move anywhere other than being straight in the middle, so I'm going to right click to cancel that transformation, and then you can left click to deselect everything. Now if I left click and drag on the left side vertices over here, and then I'll press X and select vertices to delete those vertices on that side, because what we want to do generally when you're modeling a character or any other sort of item that's symmetrical, you want to work with the Mirror Modifier, and so that creates sort of a virtual other side that you can see and work with, but you can't actually touch the vertices on that side. I will turn on the clipping as well, and what that does is that prevents, so if I turn that off and then select my cube here, you see it separates in the middle. If I go to solid, you'll see that it's separated in the middle. If I undo that and turn on clipping, it sticks together along the axis where it has mirrored. Now, as you can probably see there, the reference image is actually sitting right in the middle of our cube, which we don't really want. It's going to get in the way and be difficult to actually look at the model whilst having this just sitting right there. So I'm going to hit G and then X and just move my mouse to the left a bit, and that will move that out of the way. It's still fairly close. And when you're in the side view, this is what's called an orthographic view. So the distance of objects actually doesn't matter. They actually remain the same size, irregardless of their distance. If you do hit the number 5 on your keyboard, then you go into a perspective viewport based on that camera angle, and you see that the size of things have changed. The cube actually got bigger and the reference image got smaller. I don't want that, so I'm going to hit 5 again just to come out of that and return to orthographic. And orthographic is a pretty good way to do the meat of your modeling, and then when you actually go into when you middle click and rotate around your model, then you're actually in perspective view. So whilst you're doing the sort of work of aligning with an image, it's good to be in orthographic, and then we can go into perspective to make sure that the model's looking good. Okay, now with the cube, so we're going to tab into edit mode, and I will stay in wireframe mode for a while whilst we're getting things lined up. I'm just going to hit G and move it up, and then start getting the shape of things fairly close. So I'm going to use these vertices to sort of outline the main part of the body. And then I'll come into I'll rotate around, and then I can see that obviously that is far too wide. So I'm going to select these vertices here and hit G and then X and just bring that in to be thinner. It's hard to say exactly what sort of dimensions it should be at this point. It's just kind of a box, but we can sort of make an educated guess and sort of say, well, it's going to be the body of a creature, so it should be roughly that sort of size. So now I'll do a Control R, and with my mouse hovered over the top, we get this is called a loop cut. And I'm just going to right click again and then select these two vertices here and here and just use them to work more on just getting the silhouette of the main part of the body. And we'll do that again. And then once more towards the back. Okay. So what we can do now is select all of these vertices and actually scale them down on the Z. And that will start to give us a fairly rounded body shape, which we can, if you hold down Z and then move your mouse to the right, you get a solid viewport. And as you get more comfortable with Blender, you'll start to go, okay, I need to go wireframe, I need to go solid, I need to go material preview, or maybe I want to go to rendered. Right now they don't make much of a difference to the viewport because we're not doing much, but stick in solid and wireframe whilst you're modeling, and then check on like textured view for when you're actually working on your materials. Okay, so next we want to select here, and so we actually have technically 6 vertices going up. I probably want to scale this in a little bit more there, and bring this in on the X. These vertices would be the chest. So if I shift select to get all of those, and then G and X to bring that out. And then these vertices would actually be the hips, so they might come out even further. You sort of start to get an idea of the shape of the thing. And we might bring this one in on the X a little bit just to give a bit of shape to the body. It is sort of hard to see at this point where we're going, but that's okay. So we'll select these vertices at the front, and just by clicking and dragging. And we're going to extrude, rotate, scale, move with G, rotate with R, scale with S, and just adjust that to sort of fairly closely match the next section. And sort of keeping each of these sections fairly even in size. In an area like the head and the face, you will end up having more denser geometry, just because there's more details that you need to work with. So that's worth thinking about, that as we are extruding up, there may be more vertices here than more vertices in this area compared to, say, this area, based on sort of volume and things like that. Now we've come straight up, that's on purpose. So we want to then extrude the actual head coming out of here. I'll just adjust that a little bit, get things, yeah, around there. And bring that down to sort of where the jaw is, and then we can extrude out where the head is and get a rough shape in for the head. And we can go to solid view and bring that, at least bring that muzzle part back in. Maybe bring these vertices out a little bit. He's starting to look a bit like a velociraptor. So next I want to add in the tail. Now the tail does go off screen and off the reference, so you sort of got to guess a little bit as to how far that needs to go. I'm going to, we could stay in wireframe mode. But if you do extrude and then cancel the transformation, you'll find that those vertices are actually still there. So then if you extrude again, then you've actually got an extra set of vertices overlapping. So just be wary of that if you are looking at things and second guessing and changing your mind and that sort of stuff. It's perfectly normal, but just be aware of any geometry that you might have actually already created. So I've got that top line fairly close, and then I'll probably add in a loop cut with Control R and slide that down to about here, because there's quite a dramatic drop off there. So we'll bring these vertices up and scale in a bit, and then do another Control R just to bisect the whole thing, scale down and move up, and that's gotten this pretty close. Maybe we can bring this down a little bit more, and then from the looks of how things are going, we'll scale that down a bit more with S, and now that's looking pretty good. Now we've got 2 huge segments here, so I do want to just add in a couple of extra edge loops here. So to do that, we do Control R, and then we scroll your mouse up, just move it up once, and the more you scroll it up, the more cuts you will make. I think I only want to make 2, maybe 3 at this point on that one, and then right click to cancel the transform, and again 3 cuts, left click to cut, left click to cut, right click to cancel the transform, That just leaves things generally in the middle of where they are. One of my rules for modeling that I try to sort of keep in mind most of the time is, especially with organics, you want to have touched and moved every single vertex that makes up the model. If you're just relying on loop cuts to add in detail, then you'll find that the computer is not as good as the human eye is at measuring things, making things look organic and nice. So we want to get that tail looking nice and close. We'll bring this in as well. Maybe not quite that much. It's the sort of transition area. Something like that. Lovely. Okay, so we'll add a little bit of detail to the head. One of the first things obviously is to get the line where the mouth will open. So we'll do a Control R. And we'll actually slide this down a little bit and left click. And then this is the bottom of the mouth, so bottom of the jaw, bring that down. And just sort of try to see, I might need to bring up the, go back into object mode, so tab to go to object mode, and select the reference image. You can just select it here in the outliner, and come back to here, and bring up the opacity a little bit there. Just so I can get a better idea of what's going on. It's a little bit dark anyway in the image. So the mouth sort of follows a line. This goes fairly straight and then it curves down. And it sort of slowly curves back up. But I don't think it comes up to here. I think it probably, select the object again and tab into edit mode. I think it probably comes up to about there. So then we want to move that vertex down a bit. And obviously we've got no more vertices to work with, so we will add in, say, 3 loop cuts, and just right click to cancel that transform. And just move the vertices that have shown up to sort of line up and get that line to start flowing, which is looking pretty good. Now we do want to add in probably some loops around the mouth. So to do that, what we'll do, we'll actually move this up a little bit, maybe a bit more. And then we will go to polygon mode by pressing the number 3 on your keyboard, or by selecting the polygon face select mode over here. And then I'm just going to shift select these polygons here and extrude and scale. And that's obviously gone a bit weird, but that's perfectly fine. That's what I was expecting. What this has created is what's called an edge loop. Now with the loop cut tool we have been sort of cutting through edge loops, but we haven't really created an edge loop for a specific flow or for a specific structure on the character model. So what this loop is doing is it's basically acting as the muscle around the mouth. In the case of this reptile, it's not going to do much. It will allow you, when you're animating, to animate sort of a sneer and a snarl and that sort of thing. But it won't be quite as detailed as you will have a very similar loop for the going around the mouth of a character, and that allows you to get the lips moving. And what we do not need at this point actually is the faces that are along this middle line. So make sure you just got those shift selected, those edges shift selected, and get rid of those. To do edge selection, it's this middle one here, or you can press number 2 on your keyboard, So 1 is your vertices, so you can see I'm just selecting a vertex. 2 is your edges, and 3 is your polygons. And they're different useful workflows for just depending on what you're doing. So then we can start to make things look nice and pretty up here, and just sort of try and allow the angles on the vertices to be as soft looking as possible. So when it was down here, it was looking quite bad. You've got, you know, some weird stuff going on there. So I wanted to soften up this polygon and this polygon, and that just moving that vertex up does that. So the edge loop that we've created, if I press Ctrl R, you actually can see it now. So this allows us to add more detail around the lips, or the lips of the velociraptor, without having to interfere with any of the geometry on the rest of the model. So we can add that detail in as much as we want. So we can add in all of these extra vertices and say grab this one and pull it out and do some crazy stuff. And we get all that detail in there without actually touching the rest of the model. That's one of the reasons why we use edge loops. I want to undo that. I'm just going to Control Z a few times. Okay. Now the eye, the rest of the head. Okay, so we've got this mouth fairly defined. So we want to make sure that the rest of our polygons are actually following the head. At this point, they're really not. So we'll just sort of grab some polygons, move them around, get them a bit closer. So this angle here is quite steep, so I might bring this vertex forward a little bit. You can tell I need a bit more polygons up here. I'll just soften these up a bit. Now there is a fairly fleshy neck thing going on. I'm probably not going to model that in for the sake of the tutorial because it will end up taking quite a while. So I challenge you to model that in yourself if you want, if you're feeling up to it. It basically would be, if I was to do it, I would very quickly extrude out some of the stuff that's here and then bring it in on the X and maybe scale it a little bit and then extrude down a bit more and then move things into place. Something like that. Obviously that was very quick and rough and doesn't actually give us a very good looking model at the end of the day. It looks very weird, but once you've completed the model and if you're feeling up to it, then I absolutely would encourage you to do that. Okay, I think that's undone that. Beautiful. Now I don't want to obviously have a straight cut off here, so I want to bring this down a bit. Make a bit more of a jaw there. It's looking a bit better. I think the vertices toward the back should probably come out a little bit. Maybe. Or maybe this head is looking very square still, and I need to work on that. Okay, so let's add in an edge loop. I think there. Yeah, one there. And we can grab these vertices and just start to soften out what's going on the back of the head. And I also want to add in an edge loop along the whole body, just to have this extra bit up here. And we take a quick look at what's going on at the rest of the body. So if we select these two edge loops, so to select an edge loop is to Alt left click, and then you can Alt Shift left click to select extra edge loops. I don't think I want to have what's selected up here, so I'm going to go into side mode. I'm going to press B for box select, and I'm actually going to middle click and drag, and that will deselect those vertices there. And then I want to move these in on the X just a touch, probably ignoring most of the tail as well. There we go, so that's giving us a nice, more rounded body. For the tail segments, we can either select that separately or select just everything there, go to Vertex and Smooth Vertices. And I have that actually assigned to my quick favorites, so I'll just use that. And maybe, yeah, let's not get too fiddly about that sort of thing. So to add something to your quick favorites, you can click on the menu item. So I'll go to Vertex, we've got Smooth Vertices here, and where it's got remove from quick favorites here, I'll just click on that and then right click again, and now it says add to quick favorites. So I'll click on that, and then when I press Q, it actually brings up my quick favorites. And there's just a few commands in there that I use pretty regularly. Or that commands that are tedious to find in the menus regularly, I think is the best way to put it. And I will actually select some of the head, not all of it, but this much, and just add in, well, not add in, but just hit Smooth Vertices a couple of times, and that'll just give us a bit of a smoother shape to the head without having to do too much work. Okay. So the Velociraptor has this sort of ridge that starts sort of behind the eye, sort of comes in from here, and is fairly thick above the top of the eye. And then this sort of ridge continues down the rest of the snout and sort of tapers off at the end. To add that in is sort of a, an artistic choice as to how thick and how detailed and all that sort of thing. For me, I will show you how I can do it, and I will just select these edges, these polygons along here, and these are the ones where sort of this ridge is coming from and sort of going to. And then if we extrude and just scale it a bit, just a touch, and then maybe move along the X a little bit as well. And that's given us this row of polygons here. Oop. This polygon and this one and this one and this one and this one. So these are good polygons to use for that ridge. So we can extrude that up and then make that as defined as you like. I'm going to grab this last edge here, go to side view, and just bring that down quite a bit and try to taper things off. I might go to vertice mode. I tend to work in vertice mode most, I think. Maybe bring it up. It'll be quite strong around the eye. Let it come down a little bit. Maybe be a bit stronger again before tapering off into the snout. Now that might require a bit of work along the snout to get things a bit more shaped, but you can see there's sort of the hint of something happening there. Now, for me, that is looking like it is coming up quite high off the top of the model, which doesn't look great. So I will select these polygons, move them up on the Z. Maybe select these ones and move them along the X and just bring it out a bit. We can possibly rotate just a touch, and when you just hit rotate with anything selected, it does rotate based along your view. So just then what I did was I aligned these horizontal edges, sort of got an idea, and then rotated to get the rotation that I want. That's looking a bit better. Now we can smooth out what's happening here. We can actually just use smooth vertices to work on that. That looks okay. This needs to be brought back up a bit. Okay. Now this structure I think would be made, I mean it depends on the sort of species. You could argue that it would be made out of cartilage, so you could make it a bit bigger than it might necessarily be in nature. You might also think of it more as bone, so you might, instead of having thinner looking ridges, you might try to make them thicker looking, because it's this thick bony area that they might use when they're headbutting. It sort of depends on the character design that you're going for. So if you're thinking maybe it's something for attracting a mate, then you might want it to make it bigger and more colourful and more interesting. Yeah, for now I think that detail is looking fine. The eye right here, we want to have a big, fairly circular section cut out of the model. To get that, what we can do, because we have this edge loop here, we can do a couple of different things. To get a fairly easy circle, you do need to basically have, not having a point like this in the middle would be good. So what we can either do is select this and hit G twice to edge slide, move that back or move that forwards, and then add in another edge loop sort of towards the other side of that, and then work in your extrusions. Or, as I think I will do now, because it's an interesting way of adding in some detail, I will select this vertex and actually, I'm not going to delete it yet, I'm going to add in an edge loop here to give some more, prevent me from deleting like sort of half the head. And then I will delete this vertex, just pressing X and then vertices. And then I'll select by Alt left clicking this area, and I'll press E, right click, scale in. And now I've got this fairly non-uniform shape that's going to be difficult to work with. There's 8 vertices there, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And to have a bit more ease of control over things, there's a very useful add-on that we can use here. It's called Loop Tools. You probably don't have it installed at the moment, so if you don't, go to Edit and then Preferences, and then we go to Add-ons, and just type in here where it's the search bar, type in Loop, and we've got Mesh, Loop Tools, tick that box, close this window, and you've got Loop Tools active. So in vertex mode, with these vertices selected, I can now right click, and at the top I've got Loop Tools, and over here I'm just going to select Circle. And what that will do is actually create a perfect circle out of those vertices. Now I can see by looking at this that all of these edges are sort of rotated in one direction. So I'm going to rotate back against that and scale in a bit. And that's given us a fairly uniform bunch of polygons there. This should also be an edge loop because we've extruded it in. So what we can actually do, if we want to add more detail around the outside of the eye, then we can add in an edge loop here without interfering with the rest of the topology. If you do want to sort of create more perfect circular stuff, a good technique is to bring in a loop cut like this, and then actually move your mouse, in this case to the left, to bring the cut that you're doing in line and actually exactly on top of the perfect circle or the shape that I'm trying to copy. I'm going to left click, and then if I scale up a little bit, then I've then got access to another perfect circle that I can, maybe I need to adjust it a little bit and sort of bring things out on this side, but that's a much easier starting point than I can get rid of that, than this, and trying to make this more circular and trying to match that up and trying to figure out where I want the detail to be. Yeah. Okay, so to get the eye, we want to, we're not going to do too much as far as detailed eye modeling right now. We'll just get this circle fairly close Maybe we'll scale down in the Z a little bit. And just get a fairly decent looking ring around that. And then E to extrude. I'm going to right click and then S to scale. And that will give us a fairly good outline of that eye. Now, before I go into too much more detail with it, I think I want to bring the actual eye socket in a bit. So along the x-axis, and then I'm going to select this where the eyeball will be and bring that out. And I think I want to rotate both of these along the Z to point forwards a little bit more. And maybe I want to bring that out on the X a little bit more. Now this ridge part has gotten a bit too close to what's going on here. So I'll just bring that up and out of the way. And that's a fairly good looking eye area. Now with eyes, there's a few sort of things to know about how you will be modeling actually around the eye. So I know I will bring in this corner on the X, and I'll bring this one out a little bit. And then I can bring these two vertices out a bit. And I might bring these two in a bit. And these vertices I would probably bring out sort of perpendicular to the line along the eye. So rather than just going out, I want to actually come out and down a little bit, just to add a bit of roundness to the eye, like that. So that's give us the sort of basic shape. We can later on add in an eyeball and then extrude around that. But for now, we can just do that and then maybe even extrude. If we go to the top view, go to wireframe with that selected, and just extrude something back in. And that will help us to see that there is a eyelid there. Very nice. Now to keep things consistent, it does help to have the same amount of vertices along the top lip as the bottom lip. So we'll add the edge lip in here, and just that's will be lined up now. We want to actually add in a little bit of detail. So when it comes to actually doing the textures and stuff, we'll be sculpting on some details. I have found where moving parts are coming together, it helps to have them fairly separated before you even get there. And that can also help with certain aspects of modeling as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these loops and then these vertices at the front. I can just select that like that. And I'm going to rotate this whole selection, the jaw, rotate it about 45 degrees and bring it down. And actually get a good rotation in. We need to think about where the jaw is going to rotate from. Generally probably around the back here somewhere. So if you shift right click, you'll actually move your cursor, your 3D cursor, to this point here, or wherever it is that you're right clicking. I think around here should be fine. And then up here, we want to select so this is the transform pivot point. We'll change that from the medium point to 3D cursor. And then hit R, and you'll see that it actually rotates around the 3D cursor. So we'll just open that up a little bit, and maybe compensate by moving a few vertices around, just to give it some space. And then that will give us the space to actually work on the inside of the mouth as well, without having to hide anything yet, which would be a bit confusing for newer modelers. So I want to select the sort of the lip outline now with Alt left click, and then to extrude. We'll move in on the X a little bit, so G and then X. Just bring a little bit of thickness in there. And then there's a couple of tricky selections to do here. So we'll do the bottom first. So I just want this one vertice that I've currently got selected, but I don't want to have the rest of this selected anymore. So I'm just going to left click to deselect, and then I'm going to left click on here, and I can tell based on the orange. So when you have a vertice selected, there is some orange that sort of falls off along the edges that are connected to that vertice. So just by left clicking on that vertice, you can see that the back edge here is highlighted in orange, and that tells me that I've selected the vertice that we just added in, and I can bring that back and just add in that part there. So we'll do the same selection over here. Now you might have a bit of an easier time when you're left clicking. You don't actually have to click on the object or on the thing you want to select. So if I left click here, I'm actually going to select that vertice. And if I left click over here, it's deselected. Now I think, thankfully right now Blender's being very kind to me. So I just need to get that selected and move that out of the way. If you're having trouble, you can select multiple times. You can go to wireframe and just keep selecting on that same spot until you get the actual selection that you like. That orange selection is obviously not carrying on through the mirror. Beautiful. Okay, so we've got that sort of outline of the lips done. So then we want to extrude again. This time, I'm going to scale in the Z, and it's being a bit finicky. So scale in the Z. That's bringing it together. Oh. So we'll just scale up in the Z a bit, and then we can move up in the Z as well. And I'll get that top half positioned pretty close to where I want it, and then I'll deselect by pressing B and then middle click again, and then we'll get this bottom part, and I'm just looking at this back area first, so that's looking good. And then here we want to bring it up a bit. Oops. B in the middle click, GZ. I'm pressing G again. B and then middle click, GZ. Let me bring that back a little bit there. And then probably bring these back a little bit as well. Beautiful. And then we want to basically create the roof of the mouth and the sort of part of the mouth that's underneath the tongue. And we're just going to do that by extruding and then moving along the X and just bringing that all the way in. That will create a little triangle here. Oops. And we can just use the merge tool to get rid of this triangle. So if I select, it's important the order of selection when you're merging. So I'm going to select this vertice first and then this vertice second. Now I want this vertice to move to this vertice. So I'm going to press merge, and then I'm going to do at last, so that the last thing that I selected, which was the one in there. And then if I do the same on the top, just rotate it around until you can see it. And then I'll select this, the one that I want to move to first this time, and then select the one I want to move last. And then press M, and I'm going to move at first, or merge at first. And then that will merge it to the first one I selected. So there are different ways to sort of use that command, and it just sort of gets things done for you. Now, probably want to select most of this and scale it up a bit. Or even, we can select these and, oh, I've got the, okay, so we're still around the 3D cursor, so I want to change to medium point. That's something that was bothering me just then. So now when I select these two and scale, then it's actually scaling around where I'm expecting them to. I'll do the same here, just to move that out. And you sort of learn to see through your wireframe as you sort of get used to modeling and as you get used to your specific model that you're working on at the moment. Okay, that's looking pretty good in the head. I don't want to get into too much more detail than that. And we might bring this part of the head in slightly. Maybe include this. Just to create a bit of interesting shape and stuff. And then we've got the rest of the body to look at. So we want to do the arms and legs is the main part of what we're looking at right now. And we might save that, I think, for part 2. Because we've been going for a while now. And I don't want to overwhelm too much. So we've blocked in the body and we've got some detail in the head done. And he's looking fairly vicious already. So for part 2, we'll be modeling in the arms and the legs and making sure we get all the hands, the fingers, I guess, and the claws. We get the toes and those claws in as well. And we'll make sure we've got some deformation zones in the arms and legs as well for when it comes to animation. We want to have that all set up nicely. And I don't want to do too much in one video. I think I want to allow people to go at their own pace. Thanks for watching this part of the tutorial. Hit like if you have enjoyed what you've been watching so far. Subscribe if you're interested in seeing more videos from me in the future. We'll be definitely working on the velociraptor and getting it up to par, and getting it up to an animatable character model that you can play with. To go with every video, there is a blend file that will be uploaded onto Patreon. So if you'd like to access that, then you can sign up for any tier, and they all get the same rewards. And that will give you access to all blend file projects from any videos that have been out from 2021 onwards. Thanks again for watching. Stay safe out there, and I will see you next time. Bye!